You kept him in a cage like an animal." Madeline screamed, her voice cracking as she stumbled backward from her grandmother. 16 years. You told me he was dead, and he was right there the whole time, rotting under the cattle shed." Eleanor reached for her granddaughter with trembling hands. "Maddie, please, you have to understand, we did it to protect you." "Protect me?" Madeline laughed bitterly, tears streaming down her face. "You stole my father from me. You stole my whole life." That moment changed everything. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back to where it all began. Before we continue, if you're new here, please subscribe to my channel and follow this story to the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let me tell you about Madeline Grace Hartwell and the secrets buried beneath her grandparents' beautiful Kentucky farm. The phone rang at 3 in the morning on a cold October night in 2007. Harold Hartwell grabbed the receiver before the second ring, his heart already pounding. "Mr. Hartwell." The voice was clinical detached. "This is Dr. Morrison from Pinehurst State Mental Institution. There's been a development with your son." Harold's grip tightened. "What kind of development?" "A young woman here, Lily Chen, severe schizophrenia. She's pregnant, Mr. Hartwell, 7 months along. She claims David is the father." Eleanor sat up beside him. "Harold, what is it?" He covered the receiver. "David got a girl pregnant, at the institution." "Oh God." Eleanor's hand flew to her chest. "How is that even possible? He's supposed to be supervised." Dr. Morrison continued, his tone matter of fact. "Given both parents' conditions, the state will assume custody at birth. The child will enter foster care immediately." "No." The word exploded from Harold's mouth. "That's not happening. That baby is my grandchild." "Mr. Hartwell, I don't think you understand the legal complexity here." "I understand perfectly. We'll be there tomorrow morning. Don't let anyone near that girl until we arrive." He slammed the phone down. Eleanor was already out of bed, pacing. "Harold, think about this. David nearly killed a man. He's locked up because a judge said he's too dangerous to be anywhere else. And now you want to bring his baby into our home? What's the alternative? Let our grandchild bounce around foster homes for 18 years, never knowing who they are or where they came from. We're 63 years old. We're supposed to be retiring, not raising another child." Harold grabbed his wife's shoulders. "Eleanor, look at me. That baby is a Hartwell, our blood, and Hartwells take care of their own. Always have, always will." The drive to Pinehurst took 4 hours. Neither of them slept. By the time they pulled into the institution's parking lot, the sun was just breaking over the horizon. Dr. Morrison met them in the lobby. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the permanent exhaustion of someone who'd spent too many years in places like this. "Before we proceed, you need to understand something," he said, leading them down a sterile corridor. "Lily Chen is not just pregnant. She's severely ill. Paranoid schizophrenia type 1. Hallucinations, delusions, violent episodes. She attacked a nurse last month, bit her so hard she needed stitches." Eleanor stopped walking. "And you want us to take her home?" "I'm not recommending anything, Mrs. Hartwell. I'm simply presenting the facts. The state will not allow the baby to remain with Lily. Your options are foster care or private guardianship. There is no third choice." Harold stepped forward. "We want to see her. Now." They brought Lily to a visiting room in a wheelchair. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, with dark hair that hung limp around a pale face. Her pregnant belly seemed impossibly large against her thin frame. She stared at the wall, her lips moving silently, having a conversation with someone only she could see. Eleanor knelt beside her. "Lily, can you hear me? I'm Eleanor, David's mother." Something flickered in Lily's eyes. Her lips stopped moving. Slowly, she turned her head. "David." Her voice was barely a whisper. "They took David away. They said he hurt someone. But he didn't mean it. He loved me. He promised we'd have a family." "I know, sweetheart. I know he loved you." Lily's hand shot out and grabbed Eleanor's wrist with surprising strength. "Don't let them take my baby, please. They'll put her in a cold place with strangers. I see it in my dreams. She cries and cries, and no one comes." Eleanor's breath caught. "You know it's a girl. I know everything about her. She talks to me. She tells me her name is Madeline. She tells me she wants to live on a farm with horses and chickens and flowers." Lily's eyes were suddenly clear-focused. "Can you give her that? Can you give her horses and flowers?" Eleanor looked at Harold. He nodded once. "Yes, Lily. We can give her that. We can give her everything." Their lawyer Tom Hendricks told them it was impossible. No judge in Kentucky would grant custody to a couple in their 60s for a child with such complicated circumstances. "Then make it possible," Harold said. "I don't care what it costs." "Harold, we're talking about becoming legal guardians of a severely mentally ill woman, taking full responsibility for her medical care, her supervision, everything, on top of adopting a newborn. The liability alone." "Tom." Harold leaned across the desk. "I've known you for 30 years. You've handled every legal matter this family has ever had. Now I'm asking you to handle this one. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, make it happen." Tom stared at him for a long moment. Then he sighed and pulled out a legal pad. "I'll need to call in every favor I've ever earned, and probably a few I haven't." 8 weeks later, Eleanor and Harold stood in the delivery room at County General as Lily screamed through her final contractions. "One more push," the doctor urged. "One more, Lily, you can do this." I can't. The voices are too loud. They're telling me to stop." Eleanor grabbed Lily's hand. "Don't listen to them. Listen to me. Your baby is almost here. Your Madeline is almost here. Push, Lily. Push for her." Lily screamed one final time. And then cutting through the chaos came another sound. A baby's cry. Strong and clear and absolutely perfect. "It's a girl," the doctor announced. 7 pounds 4 ounces. Congratulations." They placed the baby in Eleanor's arms. She looked down at that tiny face, those green-gray eyes that were exactly like David's, and felt something break open inside her chest. "Madeline," she whispered. "Madeline Grace Hartwell. Welcome to the family, little one." Lily was watching from the bed, tears streaming down her face. "Is she okay? Is she healthy?" "She's perfect, Lily. Absolutely perfect." "Good." Lily closed her eyes, exhaustion overwhelming her. "Don't let them take her. You promised." "I promised, and I keep my promises." The first 3 months on the farm were harder than Eleanor had ever imagined. Lily's schizophrenia was unpredictable at best, terrifying at worst. On good days, she'd sit on the porch with Maddie in her arms, singing lullabies in a language Eleanor didn't recognize. On bad days, she'd lock herself in her room and scream at enemies only she could see. One night when Maddie was 10 weeks old, Eleanor woke to a sound that stopped her heart. Lily was standing over the baby's crib, a pillow clutched in her hands. "Lily!" Eleanor's voice came out as a croak. "Lily, what are you doing?" "The voices say she's not real." Lily's eyes were vacant, glassy. "They say I have to make her quiet. They say she's a demon wearing my baby's face." "Put the pillow down, Lily. Put it down right now." "But they won't stop talking. They never stop. They scream and I can't make them quiet unless I make her quiet first." Harold appeared in the doorway. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lily from behind, pinning her arms to her sides. She thrashed against him, screaming, but he held firm. Eleanor snatched Maddie from the crib and backed against the wall, her whole body shaking. "Call Dr. Morrison." Harold grunted. "Tell him we need to adjust her medication. Tonight." They increased Lily's dosage the next day. They installed a lock on the nursery door, and Eleanor started sleeping with a baby monitor pressed against her ear, jerking awake at every sound, every whisper, every creak of the old farmhouse settling in the night. "We can't keep doing this," she told Harold one morning, dark circles under her eyes. She nearly killed Maddie, our own granddaughter. She didn't know what she was doing. It was an episode. And what happens during the next episode? What happens if we're not there in time? Harold was quiet for a long moment. We'll figure something out. We always do. But what Harold didn't tell Eleanor was that he'd already figured something out. A plan he'd been working on for months. A plan that would change everything. It started with a phone call to Dr. Morrison. "I want my son out of there," Harold said. "I want him home. Mr. Hartwell David is committed by court order. He nearly beat a man to death. I can't simply release him because you ask nicely." "I'm not asking nicely. I'm asking how much." Silence on the other end. Then carefully. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that the official records continue to show David as a patient at Pinehurst, receiving treatment, making progress. Everything by the book. Meanwhile, my son comes home where I can care for him properly, where he can be with family." "That would be fraud. Criminal fraud. I could lose my license. You could also retire very comfortably, anywhere in the world you want. Think about it, Dr. Morrison. Really think about it." 3 days later, Harold received a call. Morrison had thought about it. The transfer happened at night. Harold drove to a back entrance of the institution where Morrison was waiting with David sedated on a stretcher. "He'll be unconscious for another 6 hours," Morrison said. "After that, he'll need the medications on this list. I've included dosages and schedules. You'll also need a doctor willing to monitor him discreetly. I can recommend someone." Harold handed over an envelope. Morrison didn't count the money, just slipped it into his coat. "If anyone asks, David Hartwell is still in room 317 at Pinehurst State Mental Institution. He's receiving excellent care. He's making progress. That's the story, and we're both sticking to it." "Understood." Harold loaded his son into the back of the van, covering him with blankets. He drove away without looking back. 15 miles from the farm, the van broke down. Overheated engine. Harold pulled to the side of Highway 64, cursing under his breath. Then he saw the lights in his rearview mirror. Red and blue flashing. A state trooper pulled up behind him. Young guy, eager, probably looking for something interesting on a boring night shift. "Evening, sir. Having some trouble?" Harold forced himself to breathe normally. "Just overheated. Called for a tow already." The trooper nodded, but his eyes drifted toward the back of the van. "What you hauling?" "Farm equipment. Nothing interesting." "Mind if I take a look?" Harold's hand moved toward the hunting rifle under his seat. "I'd rather you didn't. Been a long night." The trooper's hand moved toward his own weapon. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The night air was thick with tension. Then the radio on the trooper's belt crackled. A call. Something urgent. A domestic disturbance 3 miles north. "You take care now," the trooper said, backing toward his car. "Get that tow truck here quick. Dangerous to be stopped on the side of the road at night." Harold didn't breathe again until the police lights disappeared around the bend. He'd built the bunker years ago, back when David first got sick. A secret project that Eleanor knew nothing about. He'd dug it himself, poured the concrete, installed the ventilation and plumbing. 15 feet by 20 feet, completely hidden beneath the old cattle shed. He'd told himself it was just a precaution, just in case things ever got bad enough that David needed somewhere safe to be. Somewhere he couldn't hurt anyone. Somewhere the family could still see him. Now, finally, it was being used. Harold lowered his unconscious son down the ladder, arranged him on the bed, hooked up the IV that would keep him sedated until morning. Then he climbed back up, closed the trapdoor, spread hay over it, and padlocked the shed doors behind him. His son was home, and nobody would ever know. 3 weeks passed before Eleanor discovered the truth. She noticed small things at first. Harold disappearing for hours at a time. The new padlock on the cattle shed doors. The way he'd sometimes stand at the kitchen window, staring out at that old building with an expression she couldn't read. One afternoon, while Harold was in town, buying supplies, Eleanor walked out to the cattle shed. She tried the padlock. Locked. She walked around the perimeter, looking for another way in. Nothing. Then she noticed something strange. Fresh hay scattered near the back of the shed, covering an area that looked recently disturbed. She knelt down and brushed the hay aside. A trapdoor. "Oh, Harold." Her voice was barely a whisper. "What have you done?" She found the key on his keyring that night after he'd fallen asleep. She crept out of the house, crossed the yard in the moonlight, and unlocked the cattle shed doors. The trapdoor was heavier than she expected. She had to use both hands to pull it open. A ladder led down into darkness. "Hello," she called. "Is someone down there?" For a moment only, silence. Then a voice she hadn't heard in almost a year. "Mom." She climbed down the ladder, her legs shaking so badly she nearly fell. Battery-powered lanterns cast dim yellow light. A bed, a table, books, a small refrigerator, and there, sitting on the edge of the mattress, was her son. David had lost weight. His hair was longer, streaked with gray, despite being only 24 years old. His eyes were hollow, haunted. "Mom," he started to cry. "I didn't think you knew. Dad said he was waiting for the right time to tell you. How long have you been down here?" 3 weeks, maybe 4. I've lost track." Eleanor's legs gave out. She sank to the concrete floor, staring at her son like he was a ghost. "Your father smuggled you out of Pinehurst. He bribed doctors. He committed fraud. And now you're living in a hole in the ground while your baby daughter sleeps 50 yards away." "Baby." David's face went white. "What baby?" The words hit him like a physical blow. Eleanor watched her son absorb the news that he was a father, that there was a child upstairs who had his eyes, his blood, his genes, a child he'd never known existed. "Her name is Madeline," Eleanor said softly. "Maddie. She's beautiful, David. She looks just like you. I want to see her. Please, Mom. Please let me see my daughter." "I can't. David, if anyone found out you were here, we'd all go to prison. You, me, your father. Lily would be recommitted. Maddie would go into foster care. Everything we've built would be destroyed. So I'm just supposed to stay down here forever. Never see my own child. I don't know. I don't know what happens now." She climbed back up the ladder and found Harold standing in the cattle shed waiting for her. His face was gray with guilt. "How could you?" she demanded. "How could you do this without telling me? Because I knew you'd react exactly like this. React, Harold, you've put this entire family at risk. You've committed crimes that could send us both to prison." "And what was the alternative?" Harold's voice rose. "Leave him in that place, drugged into oblivion, surrounded by strangers who don't care if he lives or dies. At least in that place he couldn't hurt anyone else. He's our son, Eleanor. Our only child. I couldn't abandon him. I won't." They stood facing each other in the dusty shed, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on them both. "He needs to go back," Eleanor said finally. "Tonight." "No." "Harold." "I said no. I'm not sending him back to that hell. We'll figure this out. We'll find a way to make it work. But I am not abandoning my son." Eleanor stared at her husband of 40 years, the man she'd built a life with, the man who'd always been steady, reliable, predictable. She didn't recognize him anymore. 6 months, she said. 6 months to stabilize him, to figure out a long-term plan. If it's not working by then, he goes back. No arguments, no negotiations. 6 months. 6 months. Harold agreed. But 6 months turned into a year. A year turned into 5. And the secret in the cattle shed became the foundation on which their entire lives were built. What neither Harold nor Eleanor knew was that someone else was searching for answers. Michael Chen arrived in town on a Tuesday afternoon, driving a rental car with Illinois plates. He checked into the only motel in Millbrook and told the front desk clerk he was a journalist researching rural mental health facilities. He was actually Marcus Chen's younger brother, and he'd spent the last 18 months tracking David Hartwell's movements. His first stop was Pinehurst State Mental Institution. "I'm writing an article about patient outcomes," he told Dr. Morrison, sitting across from him in his cramped office. "I'm particularly interested in David Hartwell, the man who attacked my brother." Morrison's face remained neutral, but Michael noticed his hand twitch. "Mr. Hartwell is still a patient here. He's receiving excellent care." "Is he?" "Because I've spoken to 3 former staff members who say they haven't seen him in over a year. Patient confidentiality prevents me from discussing specifics." "What about the $30,000 that was deposited into your personal account 6 weeks after David supposedly attacked a nurse? Is that confidential too?" Morrison stood up. "I think this conversation is over." "It's over when I say it's over." Michael leaned forward. "My brother can't feed himself anymore. He can't remember his own name. He sits in a wheelchair all day, staring at nothing, because David Hartwell beat him so badly his brain stopped working. And you helped that monster escape justice." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. And I'm going to prove it. I'm going to find David Hartwell wherever he's hiding. And I'm going to make sure he pays for what he did." Michael drove to Millbrook the next day. The Hartwell family had owned a farm there for 4 generations. It was the obvious place to start looking. He parked on a hill overlooking the property and watched through binoculars. A white farmhouse, green shutters, horses in the pasture, an old woman working in the garden, a young girl, maybe 15 or 16, riding a horse through the fields. And behind the house, past the chicken coop and the equipment shed, a weathered gray building with a brand new padlock on the doors. Michael lowered his binoculars and smiled. "Found you." Lily had a secret too. She'd known about David almost from the beginning. 3 weeks after Harold brought him home, she'd woken in the middle of the night to a sound only she could hear. A voice calling her name, coming from somewhere outside the house. She'd followed it across the moonlit yard past the chicken coop to the cattle shed. The voices in her head were loud that night, but this voice was different. This voice was real. "Lily, is that you?" She'd knelt beside the door and pressed her face against the weathered wood. "David? David, where are you?" "I'm here. Under the shed. There's a room underneath. My father built it." "Are you okay? Are they treating you well?" "I'm fine. I'm stable. The medication is working." His voice cracked. "I heard about Maddie. Is she beautiful?" "She's perfect. She has your eyes. I wish I could see her. I wish I could hold her just once. Someday. Someday we'll be together. All 3 of us." After that night, Lily visited David whenever she could. Late at night when Harold and Eleanor were asleep. She'd sit by the cattle shed doors and they'd talk for hours. About Maddie, about their dreams for the future, about the illness they both carried and the fear that their daughter might carry it too. She never told Eleanor and Harold. It was her secret. The only thing in her life that belonged to her alone. But secrets have a way of surfacing. And Lily knew with the strange certainty that sometimes came with her illness that the truth was about to come out. On the night before Maddie's 16th birthday, Eleanor sat on the porch watching the sunset. Harold was in the barn doing the evening feeding. Maddie was in her room doing homework. Lily appeared beside her, moving silently in that way she sometimes did. "She's going to find out," Lily said quietly. "Tomorrow. I've seen it." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "The door. The one that leads down to where David cries every night. Maddie finds it tomorrow. I've seen it in my dreams over and over." "Lily, you're not making sense." Lily turned to look at her, and Eleanor was struck by how clear her eyes were. How focused. "You think I don't know? You think I've spent 16 years in this house without figuring out where you're keeping the father of my child?" Eleanor couldn't breathe. "How long have you known?" "Since the beginning. Since Harold brought him home. I talk to him sometimes. Late at night. He tells me about Maddie, about how much he wants to meet her." Lily smiled sadly. "We're not as crazy as you think, Eleanor. Sometimes we see things more clearly than anyone. Why didn't you say anything?" Because I understood why you did it. You were protecting Maddie, protecting all of us. How could I be angry at that?" Lily reached out and took Eleanor's hand. "But the time for secrets is ending. I feel it. Something's coming. Something that's going to change everything." Eleanor stared at the old cattle shed in the fading light. 16 years of lies. 16 years of watching her granddaughter grow up not knowing her father was alive just 50 yards away. Tomorrow was Maddie's birthday, and somewhere in town, a man named Michael Chen was watching and waiting, determined to expose every secret the Hartwell family had ever kept. The walls were closing in, and Eleanor didn't know if they'd survive what was coming. Maddie woke up on the morning of her 16th birthday to the smell of pancakes and the sound of her grandmother singing in the kitchen. She lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to shake off the strange dream she'd had. Something about a door, a ladder leading down into darkness, a voice calling her name. She pushed the dream aside and got dressed. Birthdays on the farm were always special. Eleanor made her famous buttermilk pancakes with fresh strawberries. Harold gave her extra chores off, and Lily on her good days would braid Maddie's hair and tell her stories about when she was a baby. But when Maddie came downstairs, something felt different. Eleanor's smile was too bright, too forced. Harold kept glancing out the window toward the back of the property, and Lily was sitting at the kitchen table, perfectly still, staring at nothing. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Eleanor said, setting a plate of pancakes in front of her. 16 years old. Can you believe it? "Thanks, Grandma." Maddie sat down, but she couldn't help noticing the tension in the room. "Is everything okay?" "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" "I don't know. You all seem weird this morning." Harold cleared his throat. "Just tired. Didn't sleep well last night." He stood up abruptly. "I need to check on the horses. I'll be back in a bit." Maddie watched him go, frowning. Her grandfather never skipped breakfast. Never. Especially not on her birthday. "Grandma, what's going on?" Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee. "Nothing, sweetheart. Your grandfather's just been stressed lately. Farm business. You know how it is." Maddie didn't believe her. But before she could push further, Lily spoke. "The birds know," Lily said quietly, her eyes still unfocused. "They've been watching the shed. They know what's inside." Eleanor's coffee cup clattered against the saucer. "Lily, why don't you go lie down? You seem tired." "I'm not tired. I'm awake. More awake than I've been in years." Lily turned to look at Maddie, and for a moment her eyes were completely clear. "You have his eyes, you know, the same color, green and gray like storm clouds over the ocean." "Whose eyes?" Maddie asked. "Lily." Eleanor's voice was sharp now. "That's enough. She deserves to know Eleanor. She's 16 now, old enough." "Know what?" Maddie looked between her grandmother and her mother. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor grabbed Lily's arm and pulled her up from the table. "Nothing. She's having an episode. I need to give her medication." "I don't want medication." Lily tried to pull away. "I want to tell her the truth about David, about what's in the—" Eleanor clamped her hand over Lily's mouth and dragged her toward the bedroom. Maddie sat frozen at the table, her pancakes forgotten, her heart pounding. David. That was her father's name. The father who died in a car accident before she was born. The father no one ever wanted to talk about. What did Lily mean about what's in the shed? Maddie waited until she heard her mother's bedroom door close. Then she got up and walked to the window, looking out at the cattle shed in the distance. It looked the same as always. Weathered gray wood, rusted metal roof, padlock on the door. But now she noticed something she'd never paid attention to before. The grass around the shed was worn down like someone walked that path regularly, and there were tire tracks leading to the back, even though they hadn't used that area for farming in years. "Maddie," she spun around. Eleanor was standing in the doorway, her face pale. "I'm sorry about your mother. She gets confused sometimes. You know that." She mentioned my father. Eleanor's jaw tightened. She doesn't know what she's saying. She said I have his eyes, green and gray, and she said something about a shed. What did she mean? Nothing. She meant nothing. Eleanor walked over and put her hands on Maddie's shoulders. Listen to me, sweetheart. Your mother is sick. Her brain creates connections that don't exist, sees patterns that aren't there. You can't take anything she says seriously when she's like this. But, no buts. Now finish your breakfast. We have a lot to do before your party this afternoon. Maddie wanted to argue. She wanted to demand answers, but something in her grandmother's eyes stopped her. Something that looked almost like fear. She sat back down and ate her pancakes in silence. The party was small. Just a few friends from school, some neighbors and the family. They had cake and ice cream on the porch. Harold gave her a new saddle for her horse. Eleanor gave her a locket that had belonged to her great-grandmother. Lily stayed in her room the whole time. By 7 o'clock, the guests had gone home and the sun was setting over the fields. Maddie helped Eleanor clean up the kitchen while Harold disappeared to do the evening feeding. "Grandma," Maddie said, scrubbing frosting off a plate. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you have any pictures of my father? Real pictures, not just the one you showed me when I was little?" Eleanor's hands stilled in the soapy water. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know. I guess turning 16 made me think about him more. About where I came from." For a long moment, Eleanor didn't respond. Then she dried her hands on a towel and turned to face her granddaughter. "There are some photos in the attic, in a box. I can show them to you tomorrow if you'd like." "Why not tonight?" "Because it's late, and the attic is a mess, and—" Eleanor stopped herself. "Tomorrow, I promise." Maddie nodded, but she wasn't satisfied. There was something her grandmother wasn't telling her. Something everyone wasn't telling her. That night, Maddie couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house creak and settle around her. At 11 o'clock, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her grandfather probably going to the bathroom. But the footsteps didn't stop at the bathroom. They went down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door. Maddie got up and went to her window. In the moonlight, she could see Harold walking across the yard. Not toward the barn where the horses were. Not toward the chicken coop. Toward the cattle shed. She watched him unlock the padlock and disappear inside. A few minutes later, a faint light appeared through the cracks in the wooden walls. What was he doing in there at 11 o'clock at night? Maddie grabbed her robe and crept downstairs. The house was silent. Eleanor was asleep, her soft snoring audible through her closed bedroom door. Lily's room was dark. She slipped out the back door and crossed the yard, staying in the shadows. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure it would give her away. But Harold didn't emerge from the shed. She pressed her ear against the wooden wall. Voices. 2 of them. Her grandfather's low rumble, and another voice. A man's voice. Younger. Unfamiliar. "She's asking questions, David. About you. About the shed." David Maddie's blood turned to ice. "I know." The younger voice was hoarse, like someone who didn't talk much. "I heard Lily this morning. From down here. She almost told her everything. Eleanor's going to increase her medication. Make sure she stays quiet. You can't keep drugging her forever, Dad. You can't keep me locked up forever either. It's been 16 years. I know how long it's been. I'm the one who's been bringing you food and medicine and books for 16 years. I'm the one who's been lying to my granddaughter every single day." "Then stop lying. Tell her the truth." "And what destroy her life? Let her know her father is a monster who nearly killed a man." "I'm not a monster. I was sick. I'm still sick. But I'm not dangerous anymore. The medication works. You know it works." "It's not about what I know. It's about what the law says. If anyone finds out you're here, we all go to prison. You, me, Eleanor. And Maddie ends up in foster care. Is that what you want?" Silence. "No," the younger voice said finally. "That's not what I want." Then we keep doing what we've been doing. For her sake. Maddie's legs gave out. She slid down the wall of the shed, her hand pressed over her mouth to keep from screaming. Her father was alive. Her father was in the shed. Her father had been here 50 feet from her bedroom for her entire life. Everything was a lie. She didn't know how long she sat there. Minutes. Hours. The cold seeped through her robe, but she barely felt it. Her mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what she'd heard. Nearly killed a man. Monster. Locked up for 16 years. What had her father done? The shed door creaked open. Maddie scrambled to her feet and pressed herself against the wall hidden in the shadows. Harold emerged, relocking the padlock behind him. He looked old in the moonlight. Old and tired and broken. He walked back to the house without looking around. He didn't see her. Maddie waited until the kitchen door closed behind him. Then she ran. Not back to the house. Not to the shed. She ran into the fields, into the darkness, her bare feet cold against the grass. She collapsed under an old oak tree, gasping for breath, and finally let herself cry. She didn't go back inside until nearly dawn. When she did, she went straight to her room and pretended to sleep until she heard her grandmother moving around the kitchen. 3 days passed. Maddie went through the motions of normal life. School chores, meals with her grandparents. She smiled when she was supposed to smile. She answered questions when she was supposed to answer. But inside, she was falling apart. She started watching, paying attention to things she'd never noticed before. Harold disappeared to the cattle shed at least twice a day. Morning and evening like clockwork. He always carried a bag. Groceries, books, sometimes bottles that looked like medication. Eleanor never went near the shed. Never. In fact, she seemed to avoid even looking in that direction. And Lily. Lily knew something. Maddie was sure of it now. But her mother had been heavily sedated since the birthday incident, shuffling around the house like a ghost, barely aware of her surroundings. On the 4th day, Maddie decided to search the house. She waited until Harold was out in the south pasture fixing a fence line. Eleanor had driven into town for groceries. Lily was asleep. Maddie had the house to herself. She started in the attic. Eleanor had mentioned photos up there. Maybe there was more. Maybe there were answers. The attic was dusty and cluttered, full of old furniture and boxes that hadn't been opened in decades. Maddie worked her way through them, systematically looking for anything with her father's name on it. She found old tax records, Christmas ornaments from the 1970s, her grandmother's wedding dress yellowed with age. But no photos of David. No mention of him anywhere. It was like he'd been erased from the family history. Then in the back corner, behind a broken rocking chair, she found a locked trunk. The lock was old and rusted. Maddie found a screwdriver and pried it open. Inside there were newspapers, dozens of them carefully folded and preserved. Maddie pulled out the top one and read the headline. Local man charged in brutal assault. The article was from 2006. She scanned it quickly, her hands shaking. David Hartwell, 23, was arrested yesterday for the attempted murder of Marcus Chen, 28. Chen remains in critical condition at County General Hospital. Hartwell's attorney claims his client suffered a psychotic episode and was not aware of his actions. Police say Maddie couldn't read anymore. She dropped the newspaper and grabbed another. Hartwell heir claims mental illness defense. And another. Wealthy farm family's son found incompetent to stand trial. And another. David Hartwell to receive private care, judge rules. The dates progressed. 2006, 2007, 2008. The story became clearer with each article. Her father had beaten a man so badly that he'd caused permanent brain damage. He'd been diagnosed with severe schizophrenia. He was supposed to be committed to a state institution, but somehow the Hartwell family had convinced a judge to let them provide private care instead. Private care. On the farm. In the cattle shed. At the bottom of the trunk, Maddie found a photograph. Her father looked back at her from the image. Young and handsome, maybe 20 years old. Brown hair, strong jaw. And those eyes. Green-gray eyes that were exactly like the ones she saw in the mirror every morning. She looked just like him. Maddie tucked the photograph into her pocket and put everything else back in the trunk. She needed to think. She needed to process what she'd learned before she confronted anyone. But as she climbed down from the attic, she heard a car pulling up the driveway. Not Eleanor's old sedan. Something else. Something unfamiliar. She crept to the front window and peeked out. A man was getting out of a dark SUV. He was maybe 40 years old, well-dressed with dark hair and sharp features. He stood for a moment, looking at the farmhouse, and there was something in his expression that made Maddie's stomach clench. He looked angry, determined, like someone who'd been waiting a long time for this moment. The man walked up to the front door and knocked. Maddie didn't move, didn't breathe. He knocked again, louder this time. "I know someone's home," he called out. "I can see the cars in the driveway. I just want to talk." Still, Maddie didn't answer. "My name is Michael Chen," the man said. "I'm looking for the Hartwell family. I have some questions about what happened to my brother Marcus." Chen, the man David had attacked. The man with permanent brain damage. This was his brother. Maddie pressed herself against the wall, her heart racing. Michael Chen knocked once more, waited, then finally turned and walked back to his SUV. But he didn't leave. He pulled out his phone and made a call, leaning against his car, watching the house. He wasn't going anywhere. Maddie ran to the back of the house and out the kitchen door. She sprinted across the yard toward the south pasture, where she could see Harold working on the fence. "Grandpa!" she screamed. "Grandpa, you have to come now!" Harold dropped his tools and ran toward her. "What is it? What's wrong?" "There's a man at the house, Michael Chen. He's asking about Marcus. He's asking about what happened." Harold's face went white. "Did you talk to him?" "No, I hid, but he's not leaving. He's waiting outside." Harold grabbed Maddie's arm. "Listen to me carefully. Go to the cattle shed. Tell your father what's happening. Tell him to stay quiet no matter what. Can you do that?" "My father..." Maddie's voice cracked. "So it's true, he's really in there." Harold's grip tightened. "You know, I heard you talking to him the other night. I found the newspapers in the attic." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe he was dead?" "Maddie, we don't have time for this right now. Michael Chen has been trying to find David for years. If he discovers he's here, if he goes to the police, it's over. Everything is over. Please just do what I'm asking. Go to the shed. Warn your father. I'll handle Chen." Maddie wanted to refuse. She wanted to demand answers, to scream at her grandfather for all the years of lies. But something in his eyes stopped her. Fear. Real fear. Not for himself, but for her. For all of them. She nodded and ran toward the cattle shed. The padlock was on the door just like always. But Harold had told her to go in. That meant there had to be another way. She circled the building looking for an entrance. On the backside, she found a section of wooden boards that looked newer than the rest. She pulled at them, and they came away with a groan. The gap was small, but she was small too. She squeezed through splinters, catching at her clothes, and found herself inside the dim interior of the shed. Old farm equipment, hay bales, rusted tools. Everything her grandfather had always described. And in the back, beneath a thin layer of straw, a trapdoor. Maddie's hands shook as she pulled it open. A ladder led down into darkness. The smell that rose up was strange. Musty, but also clean, like disinfectant in old books. "Hello," she called softly. "Is someone down there?" Silence. Then a voice, hoarse and trembling. "Maddie, is that you?" She knew that voice. She'd heard it 4 nights ago through the walls of the shed. Her father's voice. "Yes," she whispered. "It's me. Don't come down here, please. You shouldn't see me like this. But Maddie was already climbing down the ladder. She couldn't stop now. She'd spent 16 years not knowing the truth. She couldn't walk away when she was this close. The bunker was exactly what she'd imagined, and nothing like it at all. Clean and organized with books stacked against the walls and a neatly made bed in the corner. Photos covered every surface. Photos of her. Baby pictures, school pictures, candid shots taken through windows. And there, standing in the center of the room, was her father. He was thinner than the photograph in her pocket. Older. His hair was longer, streaked with gray. But those eyes, those green-gray eyes that were mirrors of her own. I wanted to meet you, David said, his voice breaking. Every single day for 16 years I wanted to come up that ladder and hold you and tell you I was your father. But I couldn't. I couldn't risk ruining your life. Maddie didn't know what to say, didn't know what to feel. Anger, grief, relief, all of it, everything at once. Grandpa sent me, she finally managed. There's a man at the house, Michael Chen. He's looking for you. David's face went pale. Chen. After all this time. Who is he? The brother of the man I hurt, the man I almost killed. David sank onto the edge of his bed. I've been waiting for this day, Maddie. I always knew it would come. You can't outrun your sins forever. From somewhere above them they heard shouting. Voices raised in anger. Harold and Michael Chen. Then a gunshot. Maddie screamed. David grabbed her arm. Stay here. Don't come out no matter what you hear. But Grandpa, I'll protect him. I'll protect all of you. It's the only thing I can do. He climbed the ladder and disappeared through the trapdoor. Maddie stood alone in the bunker, surrounded by photographs of herself, listening to the sounds of her family falling apart above her. Part 3. Lưu Ý, Viet Du 30-800-4002. Liên kết liên mật với các phân trược trong câu chuyện pha hội thoại, tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ giống văn rào cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh, tập trung vào hành động, cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Viết phần 2 đạt điểm 10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện nhanh, sửa lỗi AI kể theo ngôi thứ 3, tăng độ kịch tính, không viết lẩn mãn, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn, không nhảy sang mức document mới. 2-3 phút cần có mini climax và đặt 10-15 mini climax mới. Phần cũ. 10-12 phút có một twist lớn sâu sắc, đan xen mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu kịch tính thực tế và gần gũi. Mỗi 8-10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả, thêm đánh dấu thời gian. Lưu ý không mô tả cạnh, không có phần gạch trong bài viết và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh nhé. Show more 16-21. Orchestrated high-tension narrative continuation with multiple climaxes and twists. The user wants me to write part 3 of the story, continuing from part 2. Let me review the requirements. 1. Write 3,800 to 4,000 words. 2. Seamlessly connect with previous parts. 3. Use dialogue to create a cohesive story. 4. No introductions at the beginning of new parts 5. Use transitional sentences between part 6. Maintain theme. Avoid abrupt breaks. 7. No bullet points or subheadings. 8. American storytelling style with emotional, authentic, and relatable voice. 9. No scene descriptions, focus on emotional actions and character psychology. 10. Third-person narrative. 11. Increase dramatic tension. Don't ramble. 12. Don't introduce the next part at the end. 13. Every 2 to 3 minutes, need a mini-climax. 10 to 15 per part. 14. Every 10 to 12 minutes, need a major twist. 15. Intersperse stronger mini cliffhangers. 16. Increase natural reactions for characters. 17. Add dramatic rhythm, realistic and relatable. 18. Every 8 to 10 minutes, need an audience retention hook. 19. Add time markers. 20. No scene descriptions, no bullet points, just write content following instructions. Part 2 ended with, a gunshot was heard. David climbed up to protect his family. Maddie was left alone in the bunker. Part 3 should continue from there with the confrontation between David Harold and Michael Chen. Let me write Part 3 with high tension, multiple mini-climaxes, and major twists. Part 3. The gunshot echoed across the farm like thunder. Maddie stood frozen at the bottom of the ladder, her hands pressed against her ears, her whole body shaking. Every instinct screamed at her to stay hidden, to do what her father had told her. But she couldn't. She couldn't just stand there while her family was in danger. She climbed the ladder. When she emerged from the trapdoor, the cattle shed was empty. The front doors hung open, letting in the harsh afternoon light. She could hear voices outside, shouting, crying. Maddie ran. She burst through the shed doors and stopped dead. Harold was on the ground, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark and wet against his flannel shirt. Eleanor was kneeling beside him, sobbing, pressing a dish towel against the wound. And standing 10 feet away, a gun still raised, was Michael Chen. But that wasn't what made Maddie's heart stop. David was there, her father. Standing between Chen and the rest of the family, his arms spread wide, his body a human shield. "Shoot me," David said. His voice was calm, steady. "That's what you came here for, isn't it? To make me pay for what I did to Marcus? So do it. Shoot me. But leave them alone." Michael Chen's hand was shaking. Tears streamed down his face. 16 years. 16 years my brother has been in a wheelchair, unable to feed himself, unable to speak. And you've been here the whole time, living on this beautiful farm, protected by your rich family, while Marcus rots in a nursing home. I know. David took a step forward. I know what I took from him, from you. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about it, that I don't hate myself for it. You think that matters? You think your guilt makes up for anything? No, nothing can make up for it. But killing me won't bring Marcus back. It won't make him whole again. It will just destroy more lives. David glanced back at Maddie. That's my daughter. She's 16 years old. She just found out I exist. If you pull that trigger, the last memory she'll ever have of her father is watching him die. Chen's aim wavered. His eyes flicked to Maddie, then back to David. Please, Eleanor begged from the ground. Please, we'll do anything. We'll turn ourselves in. We'll confess to everything. Just don't hurt anyone else. Turn yourselves in. Chen laughed bitterly. You think that's enough? You bribed judges. You paid off doctors. You've been harboring a violent criminal for 16 years. You belong in prison, all of you. Then call the police. David's voice was still calm. Put down the gun and call the police. Let the system handle this. That's what you want, isn't it, justice? I wanted justice 16 years ago. The system failed. Your family bought their way out of consequences. So now I'm here to deliver the justice that should have happened back then. He raised the gun again, aiming directly at David's chest. No, Maddie screamed. She ran forward without thinking, throwing herself between her father and the gun. You can't. Please, you can't. Maddie, get back. David tried to push her behind him, but she wouldn't move. He's my father. I just found him. You can't take him away from me. Chen stared at her. This teenage girl with tears streaming down her face, willing to take a bullet for a man she'd only just met. Something in his expression shifted. The rage was still there, but underneath it something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. You love him, Chen said quietly. Even after everything you've learned. Even knowing what he did. He's sick. He was sick when it happened. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault. Chen's voice rose again. He beat my brother's head against a concrete floor until his skull cracked. He left him bleeding and broken while he stood there laughing. And you're telling me it wasn't his fault? The laughing was a symptom. David's voice cracked. I wasn't laughing because I enjoyed it. I was laughing because my brain was broken and I didn't know what was real anymore. I thought Marcus was a demon. I thought he was going to kill everyone I loved. The voices told me I had to stop him. The voices. Chen spat the word like it was poison. Everyone talks about the voices, like that excuses everything, like mental illness is a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's not an excuse. It's an explanation. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I am asking you to think about what happens next. You shoot me, you go into prison. Your mother loses both her sons, one to brain damage, one to murder charges. Is that what Marcus would want? Chen's gun hand dropped slightly. Don't you dare talk about what Marcus would want. You don't get to say his name. You're right. I don't. But I knew him, Michael. Before that night. I knew him because he was dating my fiance's friend. We had dinner together twice. He was funny, kind. He made everyone laugh. And I destroyed him. I destroyed the person he was. I have to live with that forever. But you don't have to become a destroyer too. The silence stretched between them. Maddie could hear her grandmother crying softly, could hear her grandfather's labored breathing. The blood had soaked through the dish towel, now spreading across the ground. He needs a hospital, Eleanor said, her voice breaking. Please, whatever you're going to do, please let me call an ambulance for my husband first. Chen looked at Harold bleeding on the ground. For a moment, something human flickered in his eyes. Then it was gone. Call them, he said. But nobody moves until they get here. And when the police come with the ambulance, I'm telling them everything. Everything about David being here. Everything about what this family has done. Eleanor pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. The next 15 minutes were the longest of Maddie's life. She sat on the ground next to her father, their backs against the cattle shed wall. Chen stood watch over all of them, his gun still drawn, but no longer aimed at anyone specific. I'm sorry, David whispered to her. I'm so sorry you found out like this. Why didn't you tell me? Maddie's voice was hollow. All those years, I was right here. You could have found a way. And said what? Hi. I'm your father. I nearly killed a man, and I've been living in a hole in the ground for your entire life. How was I supposed to explain that to a child? I'm not a child anymore. No, you're not. David looked at her, really looked at her, and his eyes filled with tears. You're beautiful, Maddie. You look just like your mother. But you have my eyes. I've been watching you through photographs for 16 years, and I never thought I'd get to see those eyes looking back at me in person. Maddie didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to hug him. Part of her wanted to hit him. Part of her wanted to run away and never look back. What's going to happen now? She asked. I don't know. Prison, probably. For me and your grandparents. They'll say we conspired to obstruct justice. They'll be right. And me. What happens to me? David's face crumpled. Foster care, most likely. Unless they can find a relative to take you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We were trying to protect you, and instead, we've destroyed your life. You kept him in a cage like an animal. The words burst out of Maddie before she could stop them. 16 years. You told me he was dead, and he was right there the whole time, rotting under the cattle shed. She was on her feet now, screaming at her grandmother, at her grandfather, at everyone. Eleanor reached for her. Maddie, please, you have to understand we did it to protect you. Protect me. You stole my father from me. You stole my whole life. We didn't steal anything. We gave you a childhood. A normal childhood without fear, without stigma. If people had known about David, if they'd known your mother was schizophrenic too, do you think you would have had any friends? Do you think anyone in this town would have treated you like a normal kid? That wasn't your choice to make. No, it wasn't. Harold's voice was weak but firm. We made the wrong choice, Maddie. I see that now. But we made it out of love. Everything we've done, every lie we've told, was because we love you, because we love David, because we couldn't stand to lose anyone else. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Chen straightened up. The police are coming. When they get here, I'm telling them everything. I have proof. I've been investigating this family for 3 years. I have documents, photographs, witness statements. By tomorrow, this will be all over the news. I know, Harold said quietly. I've been expecting this day for a long time. The ambulance arrived first, followed by 2 police cars. Paramedics rushed to Harold, loading him onto a stretcher. A deputy approached Michael Chen, and they spoke in low voices, Chen gesturing toward the cattle shed, toward David, toward all of them. Maddie watched it all happen, like she was watching a movie. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be her life. An officer approached David. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me. David nodded. He turned to Maddie one last time. I love you, he said. I've loved you since before you were born. Whatever happens next, please remember that. Please remember that everything I did, everything your grandparents did, was because we loved you. They put handcuffs on him. They put handcuffs on Eleanor, too. Maddie stood alone in the yard watching her entire family being taken away. Miss... A female deputy approached her gently. Is there someone we can call for you? A relative? A family friend? Maddie shook her head. There was no one. The Hartwells had kept to themselves for years. No close friends, no extended family. Just the 4 of them and their secrets. What about your mother? The deputy asked. The report says there's another woman living here. Lily. Maddie had forgotten about Lily. She ran back to the house. Her mother was standing in the kitchen doorway, perfectly still, her face blank. Mom. Maddie approached her carefully. Mom, are you okay? They took him away, Lily said softly. They took my David away. Again. You knew. You knew he was here the whole time. Lily nodded slowly. I've always known. I used to visit him at night when everyone was asleep. We'd sit in the dark and talk about you. About the life we should have had together. Why didn't you tell me? Because Eleanor asked me not to. Because I wanted you to be happy. Because the voices told me it was the right thing to do. Lily's eyes focused, suddenly becoming sharp and clear. The voices aren't always wrong, Maddie. Sometimes they see things that other people miss. What do you mean? Michael Chen. He didn't come here just for revenge. He came here because someone told him where to look. Someone who wanted to destroy this family. Who told him? Lily smiled sadly. That's something you'll have to figure out on your own. But I'll give you a hint. Look at who benefits. Look at who's been waiting in the shadows. Mom, please, just tell me. But Lily's eyes were unfocusing again, drifting back to whatever world she inhabited when the medication wore off. I'm tired, Maddie. So tired. I think I'll go lie down now. She shuffled back to her room, leaving Maddie alone with more questions than answers. The next 48 hours were chaos. News vans descended on the farm. Reporters knocked on the door at all hours. The story was everywhere. Wealthy farm family harbors. Violent son for 16 years. Local couple faces dozens of charges in decades-long conspiracy. Forgotten victim finally gets justice. Maddie didn't answer the door. Didn't answer the phone. She sat in her room staring at the photograph of her father, trying to reconcile the smiling young man in the picture with the hollow-eyed prisoner she'd met in the bunker. A social worker came on the 3rd day. A kind woman named Patricia, who spoke softly and carried a clipboard full of paperwork. I know this is overwhelming, Patricia said. But we need to talk about your living situation. Your grandmother has been released on bail, but there's a question of whether she's a suitable guardian given the circumstances. She's my grandmother. She raised me. I understand, but she also lied to you for 16 years. She helped hide a violent offender in your own backyard. The court needs to determine whether staying with her is in your best interest. So what are my options? Patricia hesitated. There's foster care. We could also look for extended family members who might be willing to take you in. Do you have any aunts, uncles, cousins? Maddie thought about Lily's words. Look at who benefits. Look at who's been waiting in the shadows. I don't know, she said. I don't know anything about my family anymore. Well, there's also the question of your mother. She's been evaluated by psychiatric professionals. They believe she's stable enough to continue living at home with proper supervision, but she can't be your legal guardian. So I'm stuck. Not stuck. We'll find a solution. I promise. But promises meant nothing to Maddie anymore. Everyone in her life had promised her things. Her grandmother had promised to always be there for her. Her grandfather had promised to teach her to run the farm. Her father had promised to protect the family. All lies. All broken. That night, Maddie snuck out of the house. She walked across the yard to the cattle shed. The police tape was still up, but no one was guarding it anymore. They'd already collected all the evidence they needed. She ducked under the tape and went inside. The trapdoor was open, the ladder still in place. She climbed down into the bunker one more time. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. The bed, the books, the photographs. But now there was a new addition. A stack of papers on the table held down by a rock, papers that hadn't been there before. Maddie picked them up and started reading. They were letters, dozens of them written in her father's handwriting, letters addressed to her. Dear Maddie, you're 3 years old today. Your grandmother brought me a video of your birthday party. You were wearing a pink dress and you couldn't stop laughing when you saw the cake. Dear Maddie, you started kindergarten this week. I watched you walk to the bus stop from my window. You were so brave. You didn't even cry when Eleanor let go of your hand. Dear Maddie, you're 13 now, a teenager. I can't believe how fast the time has gone. Your grandfather says you're becoming an excellent writer. He says you have natural talent. Letter after letter after letter. 16 years of her life documented by a father who'd watched from the shadows, who'd never stopped loving her, who'd never stopped hoping that someday she'd know the truth. At the bottom of the stack was one final letter. This one was different. It was addressed not to her, but to someone else. Dear Michael, if you're reading this, it means you've finally found me. I've been expecting you for a long time. I know nothing I say can undo what I did to your brother. I know no apology will ever be enough. But I want you to understand why this happened, not to excuse my actions, but to help you find some kind of peace. I loved your brother. Before that night, Marcus Chen was my friend. The voices told me he was something else, something evil, something that needed to be stopped. I believed them. In that moment, I believed every word they said. I was sick. I'm still sick. But I've spent 16 years paying for what I did. Not in a prison cell, but in something worse. I've spent 16 years watching my daughter grow up without me. 16 years knowing that I can never hold her, never comfort her, never be the father she deserves. If you want revenge, I understand. But I'm asking you to consider something else. I'm asking you to forgive, not for my sake, but for yours. Carrying hatred is exhausting. It eats you alive from the inside. I know because I've watched it happen to myself. Whatever you decide, I hope you find peace. And I hope Marcus finds peace too. David Hartwell. Maddie sat in the bunker for a long time holding those letters, crying until she had nothing left. When she finally climbed back up the ladder, the sun was rising. A new day. A new chapter. She didn't know what came next. She didn't know if her family would survive this. But she knew one thing for certain. The truth was finally out. And somehow, despite everything that felt like a beginning rather than an end. She walked back to the house. Lily was standing on the porch watching the sunrise. "Did you find what you were looking for?" her mother asked. Maddie showed her the letters. Lily nodded slowly. "He wrote one every month, on the 15th. Your birthday. I used to help him sneak them into the bunker when Eleanor wasn't looking. You helped him. He's your father, Maddie. Whatever else he is, whatever he's done, he's still your father. And he loved you more than anything in this world." Lily took her daughter's hand. "I know I'm not a good mother. I know my brain doesn't work the way it's supposed to. But I've always tried to do what's best for you, even when I didn't know what that was." Maddie squeezed her hand. "I know, Mom. I know." They stood there together watching the sun rise over the fields. Two broken people trying to figure out how to be a family in the wreckage of everything they'd known. Inside the house, the phone was ringing. Another reporter, probably. Another person wanting to exploit their tragedy for clicks and ratings. But among all those calls, there was one that would change everything. A call from a lawyer in Louisville. A call about a name that Maddie had never heard before. A call about the real reason the Chen family had finally found them after all these years, and the secret that Eleanor had been keeping even from her own husband. Part 4. Lưu ý, viết đủ, bàn tan trong trần bốn hiền tử, liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện pha hối thoại, tạo thành một câu chuyện liên mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liên mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới, liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng, hoặc tiêu đề phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh, tập trung vào hành động cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Viết phần 2 đạt điểm 10/10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện nhanh, sửa lời AI kể theo ngôi thứ 3, tăng độ kịch tính, không viết lân man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang mức document mới. 2-3 phút cần có mini climax và đạt 10-15 mini climax mỗi. Phần cứ 10-12 phút có một twist lớn sâu sắc, đan xen mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu, kịch tính thực tế và gần gũi. 8-10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả, thêm đánh dấu thời gian. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh, không có phần gạch trong bài viết và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh nhé. Show more 16-26 Orchestrated Narrative Continuation với twist lớn và tiết tấu kịch tính cao. The user wants me to write part 4 of the story, continuing from part 3. They want 3,800-4,000 words. Seamless connection with previous parts. No scene descriptions. Focus on action, emotion, and character psychology. Third-person narrative. American storytelling style with emotional, authentic, and relatable tone. 10 through 15 mini-climaxes per part. One major twist every 10 to 12 minutes. Mini cliffhangers interspersed. Audience retention hooks every 8 to 10 minutes. Timestamps. No bullet points or subheadings. Don't introduce the next part at the end. Write only content. Follow instructions exactly. Part 3 ended with Maddie finding letters from David. A phone call from a lawyer in Louisville. Mention of a secret Eleanor kept even from Harold. The real reason the Chen family found them. I need to continue this thread and reveal the lawyer's call and what it reveals. Eleanor's secret. The person who tipped off Michael Chen. More family drama and revelations. Let me write part 4 with high intensity, lots of dialogue, mini climaxes, and major twists. Part 4. The lawyer's name was Richard Brennan. He called 3 times before Maddie finally answered the phone. Miss Hartwell, I've been trying to reach your family for days. This is a matter of extreme urgency. My grandmother is in jail. My grandfather is in the hospital. My father is in custody. I'm 16 years old and I have no idea what's happening. So whatever you're selling, I'm not interested. I'm not selling anything. I'm trying to help you. Brennan's voice was calm, professional, but there was an edge to it. I represent the estate of Margaret Hartwell, your great-aunt. She passed away 2 weeks ago. Maddie's hand tightened on the phone. I don't have a great aunt. Yes, you do. Or rather, you did. Margaret was your grandmother Eleanor's sister. They had a falling out 40 years ago and never spoke again. But Margaret never forgot her family. And when she died, she left everything to you. To me. Why would someone I've never met leave anything to me? Because you're the only Hartwell left who isn't facing criminal charges. And because Margaret felt guilty about something. Something she did a long time ago that she could never undo. What are you talking about? Miss Hartwell, I think we should meet in person. There are documents you need to see. Documents that might change everything you think you know about your family. Maddie agreed to meet him the next day. She didn't tell Lily, didn't tell anyone. She took the bus into Louisville and found his office in a tall building downtown. Richard Brennan was older than she'd expected, with white hair and tired eyes. He gestured for her to sit down and slid a folder across his desk. Before I show you this, I need you to understand something. Margaret Hartwell was not a good person. She did terrible things in her life, things she spent her final years trying to make up for, but the damage was done long before she found her conscience. Just tell me what this is about. Brennan opened the folder. Inside were photographs, legal documents, letters. He spread them out on the desk. 40 years ago, Eleanor and Margaret were close. They grew up on the Hartwell farm together, inherited it jointly when their parents died. But Margaret wanted to sell. She'd fallen in love with a man in the city, wanted to start a new life. Eleanor refused. The farm had been in the family for generations. She couldn't bear to let it go. So they fought about money. That's not exactly shocking. It wasn't just about money. Brennan pulled out a photograph. 2 young women, almost identical, standing in front of the farmhouse. Margaret was the older sister. She was also the one their parents favored. When they died, everyone expected Margaret to take over the farm. But the will split everything 50-50. Margaret was furious. Okay, but what does this have to do with me, or with what's happening now? Brennan took a deep breath. Michael Chen didn't find your family by accident. He'd been searching for years, but he always hit dead ends. Your grandparents were very careful about covering their tracks. Then, about a month ago, he received an anonymous letter. It contained detailed information about where David was being hidden. Security codes, schedules, everything he needed to find your father. Maddie's stomach dropped. Someone betrayed us. Yes, and that someone was Margaret Hartwell. The words hung in the air like poison. Your great-aunt spent 3 years gathering information about your family. She hired private investigators. She cultivated contacts in the town. She even managed to intercept some of the medical records from the doctors your grandfather paid to treat David. Brennan pushed another document toward her. She compiled everything into a file and sent it to Michael Chen 2 days before she died. Why? Why would she do that? Because she hated your grandmother. Because she'd spent 40 years nursing that hatred, letting it fester into something monstrous. And because she wanted to destroy Eleanor the same way she felt Eleanor had destroyed her. Maddie stared at the documents. Her hands were shaking. Does my grandmother know? Does she know it was Margaret? Not yet. I was hoping you could tell her. I thought it might be easier coming from family. Easier. Maddie laughed bitterly. Nothing about this is easy. My whole life has been destroyed because 2 sisters couldn't get along. Because some woman I never met decided to burn everything down out of spite. I understand your anger, but there's more. Brennan pulled out one final document. Margaret's will. She left you her entire estate. $2 million in investments, a house in Louisville, and this. He handed her a letter, handwritten, addressed to Maddie Hartwell. Dear Maddie, you don't know me, but I've watched you from afar for years. You're the only innocent one in this mess, the only person who didn't choose to be part of the lies and the secrets. I know what I did was wrong. I know sending that information to Michael Chen would destroy your family. But I couldn't die without making Eleanor pay for what she did to me. She stole my inheritance. She stole my future. She stole everything I should have had. But you, Maddie, you deserve none of this. So I'm leaving you everything I have. Use it to build a new life. Get away from that farm, away from those people. You're better than all of them." Your great-aunt Margaret Maddie crumpled the letter in her fist. She thinks this makes up for it. She thinks money can fix what she broke. I don't think she believed anything could fix it. I think she just wanted to clear her conscience before she died. Well, she failed. Maddie stood up. "Keep your money. Keep all of it. I don't want anything from her." "Miss Hartwell, please think about this. $2 million could give you options. You could go to college, start a business, build a life away from all of this. Build a life on blood money, on the inheritance of a woman who destroyed my family. No. I'd rather live in poverty." She walked out of the office and didn't look back. The bus ride home took 3 hours. Maddie spent the entire time staring out the window trying to process what she'd learned. Margaret Hartwell. A woman she'd never known existed. A woman who had been waiting in the shadows for 40 years planning her revenge. And Eleanor had never mentioned her, not once. In 16 years of bedtime stories and family dinners and lazy afternoons on the porch, her grandmother had never said a word about having a sister. What else was Eleanor hiding? When Maddie got home, Lily was sitting on the porch, rocking slowly in the old wooden chair. "You went to see the lawyer," Lily said. It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" "The voices told me. They said you'd find out the truth today. They said everything would change." Maddie sat down beside her mother. "Did you know about Margaret?" Lily nodded slowly. "Eleanor told me once during one of my bad nights. She thought I wouldn't remember, but I always remember, Maddie. Even when I don't seem like I'm listening, I'm always listening." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it wasn't my secret to tell, and because I didn't think it mattered anymore. Margaret left 40 years ago. I thought she was gone forever." "She was, until she decided to destroy us from beyond the grave." Lily turned to look at her daughter. Her eyes were clear today, focused. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to go to the jail and scream at Grandma for keeping this from us. Part of me wants to run away and never come back. And part of me—" Maddie's voice broke. "Part of me just wants things to go back to the way they were. Before I knew any of this. Before everything fell apart. You can't go back, Maddie. None of us can. But you can go forward. You can choose what kind of person you want to be, what kind of life you want to live. That's easy for you to say. You don't have to make any choices. Your brain makes them for you." The words came out harsher than Maddie intended. She saw her mother flinch. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean that." "Yes, you did. And you're right." Lily's voice was soft, sad. "I've spent most of my life letting the voices decide things for me. Letting other people take care of me because I couldn't take care of myself. But that doesn't mean I don't understand what you're going through. I know what it's like to feel trapped, to feel like the whole world is against you. Then what do? You fight. You fight for the people you love even when they've hurt you. Even when they've lied to you. Because that's what family does, Maddie. We hurt each other, and we forgive each other, and we keep going." Maddie leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. For a long moment, they sat there together, watching the sun set over the fields. Then Lily said something that changed everything. "There's one more thing Eleanor never told you. One more secret that's been eating her alive for 16 years. Maddie lifted her head. "What?" "David didn't attack Marcus Chen because of a random psychotic episode. There was a trigger. Something that happened that night that pushed him over the edge." "What are you talking about?" Lily's hands twisted in her lap. "David was engaged before he met me. To a woman named Rebecca Chen, Marcus's sister." Maddie's blood ran cold. "Rebecca Chen, like Michael Chen?" "Yes. Michael was Rebecca's younger brother. Marcus was the older one. David and Rebecca were supposed to get married, but then David started showing symptoms. Hearing voices, seeing things that weren't there. Rebecca wanted him to get help, but David refused. He thought he could control it on his own. What happened? Marcus confronted him, told David he wasn't good enough for Rebecca, that he was going to ruin her life. They argued. And then Marcus said something that triggered everything. What did he say? Lily closed her eyes. He said he was glad David's parents would never live to see what their son had become. Harold and Eleanor had been in a car accident the week before. They survived, but at the time no one knew if they would make it. Marcus threw that in David's face, told him his parents were probably going to die hating him. And that's when David attacked him. Yes, the voices were already screaming in his head, telling him Marcus was evil, telling him he needed to protect himself. And when Marcus said that about his parents, something snapped. David lost all control. Maddie stood up, pacing across the porch. So this whole thing, this whole nightmare, it started because of a fight about a wedding, about Marcus not wanting his sister to marry a sick man. It's more complicated than that. But yes, at its core, that's what happened. Two families torn apart because two young men couldn't find a way to understand each other. Does Michael know? Does he know what his brother said to David? I don't think so. Eleanor told me the police report left that part out. David was too incoherent to explain what triggered him and Marcus. Well, Marcus couldn't explain anything after that night. Maddie thought about Michael Chen standing in their yard with a gun. Thought about the hatred in his eyes, the pain in his voice. What would he do if he knew the truth? Would it change anything, or would it just add another layer to the tragedy? I need to talk to Michael, Maddie said. Lily's eyes went wide. What? No. He tried to kill your grandfather. He wants to destroy your family. He wants justice for his brother. He wants answers. And I think I have some answers he needs to hear. Maddie, this is dangerous. You can't just walk up to the man who shot your grandfather and start a conversation. I'm not going to walk up to him. I'm going to call his lawyer. Set up a meeting. Somewhere public, somewhere safe. She looked at her mother. You said I should fight for my family. Well, this is me fighting. Not with guns or lawyers or money. With the truth. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Your father would be proud of you. I hope so. Because right now, I'm terrified. It took 2 days to arrange the meeting. Michael Chen's attorney was reluctant at first. But when Maddie explained that she had information about what really happened the night Marcus was attacked, he agreed. They met at a coffee shop in town. Public neutral territory. Michael looked different than he had on the farm. Smaller somehow. The rage that had made him seem so frightening was gone, replaced by exhaustion. I didn't expect you to want to see me, he said, sliding into the booth across from her. I didn't expect to be here either. But there are things you need to know, things that weren't in the police reports. Like what? Maddie took a deep breath. Like the fact that my father and your sister were engaged. Like the fact that Marcus said something to David that night, something that triggered the attack. Michael's face went pale. What are you talking about, Rebecca and David? They were going to get married, but David was starting to show signs of his illness and your family didn't approve. Marcus came to confront David to tell him to stay away from Rebecca. And during that confrontation, Marcus said something about David's parents, something cruel. That's not possible. Marcus would never... Your brother told my father that his parents would probably die hating him, and that's when David lost control. Michael stared at her. You're lying. You're making this up to protect your family. I wish I was, but this is the truth. My father was sick. He was hearing voices, losing touch with reality. And when your brother attacked his most vulnerable point, David's broken mind responded the only way it knew how. Even if that's true, it doesn't excuse what David did. It doesn't excuse 16 years of hiding, of lying, of avoiding justice. No, it doesn't. And I'm not here to excuse anything. I'm here because I thought you deserved to know the whole story. I thought maybe it would help you find some peace." Michael was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "I've spent half my life hating your family, hating your father for what he did to Marcus, hating your grandparents for buying their way out of consequences. And now you're telling me that my brother might have provoked the attack. I'm telling you that it's complicated. I'm telling you that there are no simple villains and heroes in this story. Just people. Broken people who made terrible choices and hurt each other in ways they can never undo. And what am I supposed to do with that? Forgive and forget, pretend like nothing happened? I don't know. I'm not asking you to forgive anyone. I'm just asking you to understand that my father didn't wake up that day planning to hurt your brother. He was sick. He's still sick. And he's been punishing himself for 16 years locked in a hole in the ground, watching his daughter grow up through photographs." Michael put his head in his hands. "I came here to destroy your family. I was so sure I was doing the right thing. So sure I was getting justice for Marcus. Maybe you were. Maybe my family deserved to be destroyed. But destroying us won't heal your brother. It won't bring back the years he lost. It'll just create more pain, more grief, more broken people." "Then what should I do?" Maddie reached across the table and touched his hand. It was a strange gesture, intimate and unexpected. But it felt right. "Let it go," she said softly. "Not for my family. For yourself. For Marcus. You've been carrying this hatred for so long. It's eating you alive. I can see it in your eyes. Don't let my father's sickness destroy you too." Michael looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time, he saw not a Hartwell, not an enemy, but a 16-year-old girl who'd had her whole world torn apart through no fault of her own. "You're something else, you know that," he said quietly. "Most people in your position would be screaming at me, threatening me, trying to make me pay for what I did. What would that accomplish? More pain, more revenge. I'm tired, Michael. I'm tired of secrets and lies and people hurting each other. I just want it to stop." "So do I." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I don't know if I can forgive your family. I don't know if I can ever let go of what happened to Marcus. But I can promise you one thing. I won't pursue this anymore. I'll tell the prosecutor I don't want to press additional charges. I'll let the courts handle whatever happens to your father and grandparents." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for myself. Because you're right, the hatred is killing me. It has been for years. And I'm tired too." They sat in silence for a while, two strangers connected by tragedy, trying to find a way forward. Then, Michael asked a question that caught Maddie off guard. "What happened to Rebecca, my sister?" "Do you know?" Maddie shook her head. "I didn't even know she existed until 2 days ago. She left after the attack. Couldn't handle the guilt, couldn't handle seeing what happened to Marcus. Last I heard, she was living somewhere on the West Coast, trying to start over." Michael paused. "She blamed herself, you know, for introducing David to the family, for not seeing how sick he was. She carried that guilt for years. There's enough guilt to go around in this story." "Yeah, there really is." Michael stood up to leave. At the door, he turned back. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about your grandfather. I didn't mean to shoot him. The gun just went off. I was so angry, so scared I wasn't thinking clearly. He's going to be okay. The bullet went through clean. He's already home from the hospital." "Good. That's good." Michael hesitated. "Take care of yourself, Maddie Hartwell. You're stronger than you know." He walked out, and Maddie was left alone with her cold coffee and her racing thoughts. She'd done it. She'd faced the man who wanted to destroy her family and found a way to reach him. Not through threats, or lawyers, or money, but through honesty, through compassion, through the simple act of treating him like a human being instead of an enemy. Maybe that was the key. Maybe that was how you healed wounds this deep. Not by fighting, not by hiding, but by facing the truth and choosing to move forward together. Maddie paid for her coffee and stepped out into the afternoon sun. She had one more stop to make before she went home, the county jail. It was time to confront her grandmother about Margaret. It was time to hear Eleanor's side of the story. And it was time to decide whether forgiveness was possible or whether some wounds were simply too deep to heal.
Part 5. Lưu ý, viết đủ 4.200 từ. Liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện pha hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề. Tránh ngắt quãng, đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh, tập trung vào hành động, cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Viết phần 5, đạt điểm 10/10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện nhanh, sửa lời AI. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ độ kịch tính, không viết lân mạn. Kết thúc dùng câu khẳng định mạnh để khép lại câu chuyện rõ ràng, trọn vẹn. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang mức document mới. 2-3 phút, cần có mini climax và đạt 10-15 mini climax, mỗi phần cụ 10-12 phút, có một twist lớn sâu sắc, đạn xen mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên, cho phản ứng của các nhân vật thêm nhịp điệu, kịch tính thực tế và gần gũi. 18-10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh nhé. Show more 16-32. Orchestrated final narrative arc với twist climax và kết thúc trọn vẹn. The user wants me to write part 5 of the story, which is the final part. They want 4,200 words. Seamless connection with previous parts. No scene descriptions, focus on emotions and character psychology. Third-person narrative. American storytelling style with emotional, authentic, relatable voice. 10-15 mini-climaxes. One major twist every 10-12 minutes. Mini cliffhangers throughout. Audience retention hooks every 8-10 minutes. Strong affirmative ending that closes the story completely. No bullet points or headers. Write only the content. Let me continue from where part 4 ended. Maddie was going to the county jail to confront Eleanor about Margaret. I need to. 1. Continue seamlessly from part 4 chapter 2. Include the confrontation with Eleanor about Margaret. 3. Resolve the storylines. David's fate. Eleanor and Harold's fate. Michael Chen's decision. Maddie's future. The family healing. 4. Include major twists. 5. End with a strong, complete conclusion. Let me write this final part with high drama and emotional resolution. Part 5. The county jail smelled like disinfectant and despair. Maddie sat in the visitation room, her hands folded on the cold metal table, waiting for them to bring her grandmother in. When Eleanor appeared in the doorway, Maddie almost didn't recognize her. The woman who had always been so put together, so composed, looked like she'd aged 20 years in 2 weeks. Her silver hair hung limp around her face. Her eyes were red from crying. "Maddie?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "You came." "I came because we need to talk. About Margaret." Eleanor froze halfway to the chair. The color drained from her face. "How do you know about Margaret?" "Her lawyer called me. She's dead, Grandma. She died 2 weeks ago. And before she died, she sent Michael Chen everything he needed to find us." Eleanor sank into the chair, her whole body trembling. "Margaret did this. Margaret destroyed us. You sound surprised. Did you really think she'd forgive you for whatever happened between you?" "I didn't. I never thought she'd go this far. I thought she'd moved on. We hadn't spoken in 40 years. 40 years is a long time to hold a grudge. What did you do to her, Grandma? What could possibly make someone hate their own sister that much?" Eleanor was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I stole her life." "What does that mean?" "Margaret was supposed to inherit the farm. She was the eldest.
She was our parents' favorite. She was the one who was supposed to carry on the Hartwell legacy. But our father, in his final years, he started to change his mind. He saw how Margaret had fallen in love with a man from the city, how she wanted to sell everything and leave. And he couldn't bear it. Eleanor wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He came to me in secret. He told me he was going to change his will, leave the farm to me, instead of splitting it equally. He asked me to keep it quiet until after he passed, and I agreed. You knew the will was going to favor you, and you didn't tell her. I told myself it was what our father wanted. I told myself I was honoring his wishes. But the truth is, I wanted the farm for myself. I loved it in a way Margaret never did. And when the will was read, when Margaret found out she was only getting half instead of everything, she was devastated. She accused me of manipulating our father, of poisoning him against her. We had a terrible fight, said things we could never take back. And then she left. I never saw her again. Maddie leaned back in her chair. So Margaret spent 40 years planning her revenge. She waited until she was dying, and then she destroyed us. I never imagined she could still hate me that much after all this time. Hate doesn't go away just because years pass, Grandma. Sometimes it just gets stronger. I know that now. Eleanor reached across the table, trying to take Maddie's hand. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry for all of it. For lying to you about David, for keeping Margaret a secret, for everything. Maddie pulled her hand away. Sorry doesn't fix anything. I know. But it's all I have left to give. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Maddie asked the question that had been burning in her mind since she left the lawyer's office. Margaret left me everything. $2 million, a house in Louisville. She said I was the only innocent one. Eleanor's eyes widened. She left it to you. I told the lawyer I didn't want it. I told him it was blood money. Maddie, no. You should take it. Use it to build a life for yourself away from all this mess. That's what Margaret wanted. She wanted me to abandon you. To leave the farm, leave the family, start over somewhere else. Maybe that's not such a bad idea. You want me to abandon you after everything? Eleanor's face crumpled. I want you to be happy, Maddie. I want you to have opportunities that I've destroyed by my choices. If taking Margaret's money and leaving this place behind is what it takes for you to have a future, then yes, do it. Don't let loyalty to me ruin your life. It's not that simple. Why not? Because you're my grandmother. Because despite everything, I still love you. And because I'm not going to let Margaret win. She wanted to tear this family apart. She wanted to destroy us completely. I'm not going to give her that satisfaction. Eleanor started to cry. Not the quiet, controlled tears Maddie had seen before, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. I don't deserve you. Eleanor gasped. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Probably not, but you're going to get it anyway. Maddie reached across the table and took her grandmother's hand. We're family, Grandma. Broken, messed up, complicated family, but family. And that has to count for something. The guard called time. Maddie stood up to leave, but Eleanor grabbed her arm. Wait, there's something else you need to know. Something I've never told anyone. What? David's illness. The schizophrenia. It didn't just appear out of nowhere when he was 23. There were signs when he was younger, signs I ignored because I didn't want to believe my son was sick. What kind of signs? He used to talk to people who weren't there, see things that weren't real. I told myself it was just a vivid imagination. I told myself he'd grow out of it. And then when he was 17, something happened, something I've spent decades trying to forget. Maddie's heart was pounding. What happened? There was a boy at his school, Tommy Martinez. He and David got into a fight over something stupid, and David hurt him. Badly. But Tommy's parents didn't want the scandal of pressing charges against the Hartwell family. And I didn't want my son labeled as violent or mentally ill, so we paid them off. Made it go away. You covered up an assault when David was 17, 6 years before he attacked Marcus. I thought it was an isolated incident. I thought he'd learned his lesson, but I was wrong. If I had gotten him help back then, if I had admitted he was sick instead of protecting our family's reputation, maybe Marcus Chen would still be whole. Maybe none of this would have happened. Maddie stared at her grandmother. The revelations kept coming, each one worse than the last. Does Dad know? Does he know you covered up what he did when he was 17? No. We told him Tommy's family decided not to press charges because the fight was mutual. We never told him the truth. So he's been carrying guilt for Marcus all these years, not knowing that you could have prevented it. Yes. Eleanor's voice was hollow. One more lie. One more secret. That's all this family is, Maddie. Lies and secrets stacked on top of each other until we couldn't remember what was true anymore. The guard opened the door. Time's up. Maddie walked out of the visitation room feeling like she'd been punched in the stomach. Every time she thought she'd uncovered all the secrets, there were more. Layers upon layers of deception, each one worse than the last. She drove straight to the state psychiatric facility where David was being held pending his trial. The doctors had determined he was competent enough to stand trial, but would likely be committed to a mental institution rather than prison given his long history of illness. The facility was different from the county jail, cleaner, quieter. But there was the same sense of despair hanging in the air, the same feeling of lives put on hold. David was waiting for her in a private meeting room. He looked better than the last time she'd seen him. They'd adjusted his medication, cleaned him up. But his eyes still had that haunted quality, that weight of years spent in isolation. Maddie. He smiled when he saw her. I didn't think you'd come back. I need to ask you something. About Tommy Martinez. David's smile faded. How do you know about Tommy? Grandma told me. She told me about the fight, about the payoff, about how she covered the whole thing up. I didn't know about the payoff, not until years later. I thought his family just decided to let it go. Would it have made a difference if you'd known? David was quiet for a long moment. Maybe. I don't know. I was 17, confused, scared of what was happening in my head. If someone had forced me to get help back, then maybe I would have learned to manage the voices earlier. Maybe I would have recognized the warning signs before they got out of control. So Grandma's decision to protect you actually made things worse. That's the tragedy of good intentions, Maddie. People try to help the ones they love, and sometimes they end up hurting them instead. Maddie sat down across from her father. What's going to happen to you? What's the lawyer saying? 10 to 15 years in a state psychiatric facility. Maybe less if I show good behavior and respond well to treatment. I'll be an old man by the time I get out. That doesn't seem fair. You were sick. You didn't know what you were doing. Fair or not, it's the consequence of my actions. Marcus Chen is in a nursing home, unable to feed himself or speak. Whatever happens to me, it can't compare to what he's been through. I talked to Michael Chen yesterday. David's head snapped up. You what? I met him at a coffee shop. I told him about Rebecca, about what Marcus said to you that night. I told him the whole truth. Maddie, that was dangerous. He tried to kill your grandfather. I know, but I had to try. I had to see if there was a way to end the cycle of hatred. And what did he say? He said he's not going to pursue additional charges. He said he's tired of carrying the anger. David's eyes filled with tears. You did that? You got Michael Chen to back off. I didn't get him to do anything. I just told him the truth and let him make his own choice. You're remarkable, Maddie. You know that after everything this family has put you through, you're still fighting for us, still trying to hold us together. Someone has to. They talked for another hour. About the past, about the future, about all the years they'd lost. David told Maddie stories about her mother, about how they'd fallen in love, about the dreams they'd had before everything fell apart. Maddie told David about the letters she'd found in the bunker, about how they'd helped her understand him. When visiting hours ended, David walked her to the door. I have something for you, he said. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. I wrote this last night. I wasn't sure if I'd ever get the chance to give it to you. Maddie unfolded the paper. It was a letter handwritten like all the others. Dear Maddie, if you're reading this, it means you came back. It means that despite everything, you still want me to be part of your life. I don't have words to describe what that means to me. For 16 years, I watched you from a distance, loving you in silence, praying that someday you'd know the truth. Now you do. And instead of running away, you're still here. I'm not going to be around for the next part of your life. The courts will decide my fate, and whatever happens, I'll accept it. But I need you to know something before I go. You are not your parents' illness. You are not destined to repeat our mistakes. The genes you carry are just one part of who you are. The choices you make, the love you give, the person you become, that's what defines you. Don't be afraid of the future, Maddie. Don't spend your life waiting for symptoms that might never come. Live. Love. Take risks. Make mistakes. And if you ever start to hear voices that shouldn't be there, if you ever start to see things that don't exist, get help immediately. Don't do what I did. Don't try to fight it alone. I love you. I've loved you since before you were born, and I'll love you until the day I die. Your father, David. Maddie folded the letter carefully and put it in her pocket with all the others. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for not giving up on me. She hugged him then for the first time. He stiffened at first, unused to physical contact after so many years. Then his arms wrapped around her, and they stood there, father and daughter, making up for 16 years of missed embraces. The weeks that followed were a blur of court appearances and legal proceedings. Harold was released from the hospital and charged with obstruction of justice. Eleanor faced the same charges, plus additional counts related to the cover-up of David's earlier assault. The prosecutors talked about conspiracy, about decades of deception, about a family that had put themselves above the law. But something strange happened during the trial. Michael Chen took the stand as a witness for the prosecution, but instead of condemning the Hartwells, he spoke about Maddie, about the 16-year-old girl who had reached out to him in the middle of a crisis, about the conversation they'd had in the coffee shop, about how she'd helped him see the situation differently. I came to that farm looking for monsters, Michael said from the witness stand. What I found was a family. A broken, dysfunctional family that had made terrible choices, but a family nonetheless. And I realized that destroying them wouldn't bring my brother back. It would just create more victims. The prosecutor objected. The judge overruled. Michael continued, I'm not asking you to let them go unpunished. What they did was wrong. But I'm asking you to consider the circumstances. David Hartwell was sick. His parents were trying to protect him the only way they knew how. They made mistakes, but they made them out of love. It wasn't enough to save them from conviction. Harold and Eleanor both received suspended sentences and 5 years of probation. They would keep the farm, but they'd be under constant supervision. David was committed to a state psychiatric facility for an indefinite period, but it was better than it could have been. Much better. After the trial, Maddie made a decision. She went back to Richard Brennan's office and accepted Margaret's inheritance. I thought you said it was blood money, the lawyer remarked. It is, but I'm not going to use it to run away from my family. I'm going to use it to help them. She set up a trust fund for David's medical care, ensuring he'd have access to the best treatment available. She paid off the farm's debts, which had been piling up during all the legal troubles. She hired a full-time caregiver for Lily, someone who could help manage her medication and keep her safe. And she donated the rest to the Marcus Chen Foundation, an organization that provided support for victims of violent crimes and their families. Michael Chen had started it years ago, but it had been struggling financially. Maddie's donation would keep it running for decades. When Michael heard about the donation, he called her. You gave us $1 million. Margaret owed your family more than that. I'm just trying to make things right. Maddie, you don't owe us anything. You were a victim in all this, just like Marcus. Maybe, but I had a choice. I could have kept the money, lived, comfortably pretended none of this ever happened. Instead, I chose to do something meaningful with it. That's what my father would have wanted. What my grandmother should have done years ago. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Michael said something that surprised her. "Rebecca wants to meet you." "Rebecca, your sister David's ex-fiancée." She saw the news about the trial. She's been following the whole story from California. She says she needs to talk to you. She says she has something important to tell you. Maddie flew to San Francisco 2 weeks later. Rebecca Chen met her at a coffee shop near the airport. She was in her 40s now, with streaks of gray in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of years of grief and regret. "You look like him," Rebecca said when she saw Maddie. "Like David when he was young, before everything went wrong." "I've been told that a lot lately." They sat down, ordered coffee, made small talk about the flight and the weather. Then Rebecca got to the point. "I've been carrying something for 20 years, something I've never told anyone. And after seeing what you did at the trial, after hearing about how you donated the money to Marcus's foundation, I realized I couldn't keep it secret anymore." "What is it?" Rebecca took a deep breath. "The night David attacked Marcus, I was there. Not in the room, but outside. I heard everything that happened." Maddie's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "You were there." "David and I had been fighting. He was getting worse, more paranoid, more disconnected. I'd told him I thought we should postpone the wedding until he got help. He didn't take it well. He stormed out of our apartment, and I followed him, trying to calm him down." "What did you see?" "I saw Marcus intercept him in the parking garage. They started arguing. Marcus was saying terrible things, things I'd never heard my brother say before. Calling David crazy, calling him dangerous, saying he was going to make sure I never married him." Rebecca's voice was shaking now. "And then Marcus said something about David's parents, about the car accident, about how they were probably going to die, and David just snapped. I watched it happen. I watched my fiancé beat my brother until he couldn't move anymore. Why didn't you stop it?" "I tried. I screamed at them to stop. But David couldn't hear me. He was somewhere else in his own head fighting demons that weren't really there. By the time I got to them, Marcus was already unconscious." "You were a witness. Why didn't you testify at David's trial?" "Because I was a coward." Tears streamed down Rebecca's face. "Because I blamed myself for not seeing how sick David was. Because I was afraid that if I told the truth, if I admitted what Marcus had said, it would make people think my brother deserved what happened to him. So, you let everyone think David attacked without provocation." "Yes. And I've hated myself for it every day since. David went to prison, or what everyone thought was prison, because I was too ashamed to tell the truth." Maddie didn't know what to feel. Anger, sympathy. Both at once. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you deserve to know. Because your father deserves to have someone speak the truth about what really happened that night. And because I'm finally ready to face what I did." Rebecca wiped her eyes. "I'm going to write a statement, a full account of everything I saw and heard. I'm going to send it to the court, to the prosecutor, to everyone. Maybe it won't change anything legally, but at least the truth will be out there. It might help my father's appeal. I hope so. I hope something good can come out of all this pain." They talked for another hour. Rebecca told Maddie about her life in California, about the therapy she'd gone through, about the guilt she'd carried for 2 decades. Maddie told Rebecca about growing up on the farm, about finding out the truth, about trying to hold her broken family together. When they parted, Rebecca hugged her tightly. "Take care of yourself, Maddie. And take care of David, too. Tell him I'm sorry. For everything." "I will." 6 months later, everything had changed. David's case was reopened based on Rebecca's statement. The new evidence didn't exonerate him, but it led to a reduced evaluation period. With good behavior and continued treatment, he might be released in 5 years instead of 15. Harold and Eleanor were still on probation, but they'd found a new rhythm on the farm. The secrets that had poisoned their family for decades were finally out in the open. There was nothing left to hide, nothing left to protect. In a strange way, it was liberating. Lily had good days and bad days, same as always. But now Maddie understood her mother better. Understood the burden she'd been carrying, the love she'd been hiding, the sacrifices she'd made to keep the peace. And Maddie herself. She was 18 now, a legal adult, free to make her own choices about her future. She chose to stay on the farm, not because she had to, not because she felt obligated, but because this was her home. These were her people, and no matter how broken they were still family. On a warm summer evening, Maddie sat on the porch with Lily watching the sun set over the fields. The cattle shed was gone now, torn down, and replaced with a new structure. A memorial garden planted with flowers and surrounded by benches where anyone could sit and reflect. "Are you happy?" Lily asked her daughter. Maddie thought about everything that had happened, the lies she'd uncovered, the truths she'd learned, the pain she'd endured, and the healing she'd begun. "I'm getting there," she said. "It's a process. Life always is." "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you regret it? Falling in love with Dad, having me all of it?" Lily was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady, one of her rare moments of perfect lucidity. "Not for 1 second. Your father was the love of my life. And you, Maddie, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. The voices may tell me many things, but they've never told me to regret loving you." Maddie leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I love you too, Mom." "I know, sweetheart. I've always known." They sat there together as the sky turned orange and pink and purple, as the first stars appeared overhead, as the crickets began their evening song. The farm was quiet now, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for years. The secrets were out, the wounds were healing, and for the first time in her life, Maddie felt like she knew exactly who she was and where she belonged. She was Madeline Grace Hartwell, daughter of 2 schizophrenics, granddaughter of well-intentioned criminals, survivor of a family that had nearly destroyed itself with lies. But she was also something else, something stronger, something that couldn't be defined by genes or circumstances or the mistakes of previous generations. She was herself, whole and complete and ready for whatever came next. The story of the Hartwells wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. David still had years of treatment before him. Harold and Eleanor still had to make amends for their choices. Lily would still have episodes where reality slipped away. But they would face it together. As a family. Not the perfect family Maddie had believed in as a child, but something better. A family that knew its own darkness and chose to love each other anyway. That evening, before she went to bed, Maddie wrote a letter. Not to her father or her grandmother or Michael Chen. To Margaret. "Dear Great-Aunt Margaret, you don't know me, and I never got the chance to know you. By the time I learned you existed, you were already gone. You spent 40 years hating my grandmother. You spent your final breath trying to destroy the family that you felt had wronged you. And in some ways, you succeeded. You tore us apart. You exposed every secret, every lie, every hidden shame. But here's the thing about tearing things apart. Sometimes it's the only way to put them back together right. Because of you, I know the truth about my father. Because of you, I had the chance to meet him, to talk to him, to tell him I love him. Because of you, our family finally stopped hiding. I don't forgive you. What you did was cruel and vindictive. But I understand you. I understand what it's like to feel betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you. I understand how that kind of hurt can fester into something monstrous. I'm not going to let that happen to me. I'm not going to spend my life nursing grudges and planning revenge. I'm going to take the broken pieces of this family and build something new. Something honest. Something real. You wanted to destroy us. Instead, you set us free. So thank you, I guess, for the worst gift anyone has ever given me, and for the unexpected blessing hidden inside it. Your great-niece, Maddie. She folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and placed it in a drawer with all the other letters she'd collected. Her father's letters, the ones he'd written to her every month for 16 years. Someday, she'd show them to her own children. She'd tell them the whole story of the Hartwell family. The good parts and the bad parts. The love and the lies and the long road to redemption. But that was for the future. For now, all that mattered was this moment. This quiet evening on a Kentucky farm. This family broken but healing. This life difficult but worth living. Maddie turned off the light and climbed into bed. Outside her window, the memorial garden stood where the cattle shed used to be. A reminder of everything they'd lost and everything they'd gained. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, new chances to get it right. But tonight, for the first time in months, Maddie fell asleep smiling. Because she finally understood what her father had tried to tell her in all those letters. What her grandmother had been trying to protect all those years. What her mother had known all along despite the chaos in her mind. Family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up. About choosing love over anger, forgiveness over revenge, hope over despair. It's about taking the broken pieces and holding them together until they start to heal. The Hartwells had made terrible mistakes. They had lied, hidden, protected, and enabled. They had let fear drive them into darkness. But they had also loved. Fiercely, desperately, imperfectly. And in the end, that love was stronger than all the lies. Maddie knew that now. She carried that knowledge like a light inside her chest, warming her from within. She was a Hartwell, flawed and complicated and scarred by her history. But she was also free. Free of secrets. Free of shame. Free to build whatever future she chose. And that, more than any inheritance or apology or revelation, was the greatest gift her family had ever given her. The truth had nearly destroyed them. But in the end, the truth was what saved them, because that is what families do. They break, they heal, they carry on. And love, real love, survives it all.